Hello, and welcome to CyberDeck Users Weekly, a bi-weekly podcast about how to own technology. I'm Paul Miller, and I'm joined today by John Cantrell, a developer who's focused on making Bitcoin better and making Bitcoin software that's more accessible. And you're the lead of the Juggernaut project, basically, right?
Hey, yeah, that's correct.
So, can you explain just at a real high level what Juggernaut is and what your role in that project is?
Sure. So Juggernaut is an idea that was spawned sort of from a feature that was implemented in the Lightning Network. And so the Lightning Network, for those who don't know, is a layer 2 system or protocol above Bitcoin. And it allows for lightning fast, for lack of a better word, payments, micropayments. And so you can send something as little as 1 Satoshi, which is, or even 1,000th of a Satoshi, which is 100 million per Bitcoin. And so, and that was sort of its primary use case was, let's enable the ability to send and receive payments really fast, really low fee, compared to on-chain, which takes, 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how many confirmations you want to wait for, and fees, ebb and flow with demand. And so, recently, as of maybe about 6 months ago, a feature was enabled on some of the Lightning implementations. This idea of a key send payment, which just simply means you can kind of send a payment without needing to create an invoice first. And so it's a lot like original Bitcoin, where you can just send a payment to someone if you know their public key. And with that, they also enable the ability to attach arbitrary data. And so you now have this idea of, as Elizabeth Stark from Lightning Labs puts it, value-backed data transfer. And so I can make a request or transfer data on the internet and include a payment with that. Normally, in traditional payments with a credit card on the internet or pretty much anywhere, you would have to send the data and the payment separately. Like they're separate processes. You're like, okay, I make sure I got the payment and then I can send the data. And with this is sort of the first time where you can send a payment and the data in a single request. And so I thought when I saw that this is something interesting. This is something worth paying attention to. This was something that we couldn't do last year, and now we can do. And so, what does this enable? What capabilities are now possible that weren't before? And so one of the first prototype apps one of the L&D developers released was kind of a command line app messenger he called WhatsApp instead of WhatsApp. And it was just sort of demoing this key send idea where he could use the data attached to a payment to send a message. And so I could send a payment for 1 Satoshi to someone and say, hey, what's up? What's up? And if their node knew what to look for in that payment data, they could then read the message back out. And so I took this idea and sort of ran with it. And that's where Juggernaut came from. And I thought, let's take this prototype and, turn it into a full-fledged consumer. Well, to say it's consumer ready is being very generous, but, more user-friendly.
It's trending in that direction.
Yeah, we're getting there. And so sort of like, let's rebuild Telegram or Signal, one of these more privacy-focused chat apps, but on top of this new Lightning Network technology. And so that was sort of the birth of the idea. And then once you have that, there's a lot of cool ideas you can then go off and explore.
Yeah, so maybe just to clarify a little bit about the layer 2 that you're building on top of Lightning. I remember being very confused with Lightning of why you always needed to create the invoice before someone could pay. You'd have to create an invoice, give them that invoice. It might be like a QR code or something, and then they could pay you. Do you know, was that just like order of operations, that was the easier thing to implement first, or are there other reasons for that this was
I don't know exactly, but
addition?
I think that's correct. So like the way the underlying technology works with the hash time lock contracts, I think it just made it easier and made more sense for like the receiver to know that they wanted to be paid. I think what you said is right. It was sort of like the natural progression, and then this was something they realized they could do later.
And then is there a limit? Onion, onion. There's onion routing. I think we went into onion routing on another episode of this podcast. But
Mhm.
Lightning is a peer-to-peer network. You're sending a message. It might not be directly to the recipient. It might be passed from node to node. So I'm guessing there's some sort of limitation on what this data payload could be, right? You kind
Yeah,
of
that's
send
correct.
like a zip file.
Yeah, I mean, you probably could. And one thing you could do is like, I haven't implemented this, but I thought, there's an idea where, so yeah, back to the original question, there is a limit. And it's not, no one really knows what it is. I've tried to ask a lot of the L&D developers and they're just like, yeah, there's a limit, but it depends on how many hops and depends on everyone's node configuration. So it's not like some hard to find limit, like
Mm,
the, 1 megabyte limit, but, um, I've been able to send some pretty long messages using Juggernaut and haven't ran into issues. But what you could
okay.
do is, I think, like the packets on the internet are routed, you could break up your zip file or your movie or whatever into 1 kilobyte chunks and just send millions of
Ah.
them. So that is a possibility, even if there is some kind of limit that we would run into.
Yeah, because it reminds me a little bit. Uh, you can put arbitrary data in a transaction on Bitcoin or something like kind of like arbitrary data, but it's
Yeah,
sort of it's not a core part of the protocol in the sense that it's kind of at the node's discretion of whether they want to store that data. And it seems like most nodes do store that data, but it's in some sense optional. So I'm just wondering what
yeah,
like the future of Lightning, how well it looks like it's going to be supporting this use case.
yeah. That's actually a great question. So I don't know the answer, obviously, but I think, like you mentioned, like the on Bitcoin layer one, people used to use the op return opcode to then shove a bunch of arbitrary data in their transactions. And I think it's just an optimization that some of the newer nodes do, the newer versions of Bitcoin D. But if you're still running a true full node, then you wouldn't probably. Well, you can always trim it because you don't need to save it, right? But you still need to download it. So
Uh,
the data is still always kind of there. It's just you might not need it. And same with Juggernaut is like I actually have a separate database in the app that we're using that when it receives a new payment, it parses the message out of the invoice and then saves it in Juggernaut's message database. And so theoretically, if it were to get pruned by L&D or whichever node you were running, you could still have a copy in the
mm.
whatever app is using it.
So it's really thinking, yeah. So this is the transport, and this is not your database. I like that distinction.
Yeah. Well, it
Uh,
could, yeah, it's also the master source. It's like the master record, sort of. If you ever needed to go back and refetch all your messages, you can go ask your node to give you your history of payments. But at the same time, that's slow. And so we like to keep a copy locally.
okay. Well, so the way I wanted to approach this of trying to explain Juggernaut, but also uh, decentralized messaging is a bit of a I don't know if it's a white whale, if that's the right term, but I just, there's a lot of things right now that I can find a free and open source and self hosted alternative to varying degrees and varying degrees of ease. But, if I want to
Mm-hmm.
make my own blog, the web is a standardized protocol. I can host it locally if I can figure out how to punch through my firewall
Yeah.
or whatever. I can, get a VPS somewhere, um, HTTP exists, or I could put it on Gopher or whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things that are, but I can't send a message to someone right now without, in very few exceptions. There's XMPP, I believe that's what
Yep.
it's called, like the old Jabber protocol.
Mm-hmm.
There's IRC.
Yep.
Uh, Nowadays there's Matrix. But like in real life, it's hard enough to try to get friends to install Signal.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so it feels like a real major. It's either difficult for some reason, or it just hasn't been approached right yet, or But
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried that maybe it's such a hard problem that we're always gonna live in a world where we're at somebody else's good graces to be able to send messages to each other, and it seems like such a primitive of communication. I'm really hoping there's a good solution. So what I wanted to do is sort of go through the different like properties of messaging, and maybe we could discuss a little bit how they're solved traditionally and then how Juggernaut is approaching them, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
we can try. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so the first one I was thinking of is identity and discovery. So this is famously controversial in Signal, because Signal is a
Hmm.
very good encrypted messaging app in a lot of regards, but you
Yep.
use phone numbers as your
I know.
ID.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating. I'm someone who would like to. I'm hoping in my lifetime, and maybe in the next decade, to just not have a phone number anymore as my stable ID, because it's a huge security risk. It really centralizes a lot of power in these
Yep.
companies that control phone numbers and phone lines and stuff. So, anyways, yeah. So maybe you could help explain a little bit about how Juggernaut's doing ID and how you're thinking about that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's a really tough problem, and I think the reason you see like Signal and WhatsApp and even Telegram, I'm pretty sure like lots of these more popular mainstream apps using phone numbers, just because of the second half of that, which is the discovery, and that's really if you once you get rid of phone number, discovery becomes your big problem. So with Signal and Telegram and all these guys, where you put in your phone number and you can attach it to your contacts, you can then easily message everyone that you have their phone number of, which is already a system in place that everyone uses, and well, not everyone, most people use, and is pretty widespread. And so, uh, but with Juggernaut, it's exactly that same thing. You that feeling you had, like, wow, Signal is this great example of a end-to-end encrypted open source, just somewhat decentralized system. But the first thing they asked me for is my phone number. I'm like, what the hell, man? And so that's sort of one of the things with Juggernaut is there is absolutely no, identifying personal identifying information if you don't want there to be. And so um, when you run a Lightning node, each node has kind of a master public key. It's just like any other public key you would have in an encrypted system, and we use that as the main identifier. And so it's not user friendly. It's really hard to discover, as I mentioned, but it's unique to you, and it reveals almost no information about you. And you can kind of create a new one by creating a new node. And so it's sort of the natural fit, I guess, when you're using the Lightning Network, since that's how you identify nodes on the Lightning Network.
Hmm.
With that said, it does allow for a friendly like alias or username to be attached to it. But again, there's no kind of user system that's managing uniqueness. So, there can be 25 John Cantrells and no one will know which one's the real one unless they know my public key. And so, and at the same time, no one, like I mentioned, the discovery problem is the big challenge. Is great, I'm running Juggernaut, but no one knows my public key. How do I tell someone my public key?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have any thoughts? I mean, like, one of the most interesting. Um, I really liked Keybase's growth hacking method, because when you're like
Mm-hmm.
you're verifying your identity, and you're adding another point of, I don't know if it's called the chain of trust, or you're extra confirming that you are who you are. So you put a keybase.txt on your website, and you put something on your GitHub, and then you tweet, I'm
Yeah.
verifying myself on
Spread it
Keybase.
everywhere. Yeah.
And I'm always amazed how many people find me on Keybase. I have a public profile on Keybase, and Keybase
Mm-hmm.
looks like it's dying because it was centralized, and who could
Yep.
who could have guessed. But that was an interesting. So I mean, I guess if people wanted to find me on Juggernaut, I would post my Lightning nodes public key if I wanted people to find me. Is that a possible method of discovery? I could tweet it out. I guess in some
Yeah.
sense
I mean,
I'm
that's
making a real strong correlation between my real identity and my node.
Yeah, there's sort of like an inverse relationship, right, between privacy and your discoverability. If you can attach it to all your identities, like you mentioned, and then people who know those identities could find you, which is what I did when I announced Juggernaut. I tweeted out my public key, like, "Oh, by the way, here's how you can reach me," and I did get maybe 50, 60 people that messaged me that week using that. So it is sort of your only option. It's sort of like, who are the people that you want to talk to, and how do you want them? How do you want them to reach you? Like, what are your channels, and what other communication channels do you want to expose to those people? So it's sort of up to you. And I don't think there's, when privacy is your main concern, there's not some like magic solution here.
Is it plausible to that you'd have something kind of like you have like email aliases, like on Gmail, I'll do like spam plus my name, or on other email services, I just have a second address or that forwards, so that I can like when I'm signing up for something that seems kind of scammy or spammy, I give them my spam
Yeah,
address. Is there like something kind of like an XPub where you can derive sub keys from your primary key so you can kind of
yeah. That's
make
a
your
that's a really cool idea. I hadn't had it, but yeah, you could set up some kind of like even hosted, like somewhat centralized forwarding service, right? Where they wouldn't like be, since it's peer to peer onion routed. The forward also, they wouldn't really know where it's going, and so yeah, I think you could set up some kind of forwarding service. I don't know if you could have a single node that had like I don't think, I mean, I know you can't have a single node with what you're describing, like sort of multiple pub keys that map to the same node, but I think you could set up sort of like a redirect, essentially, that
hmm.
gives you a level of indirection where people don't, they're not really sending to your actual node. I don't know if that gains you anything. I need to think more about it, but it's an interesting idea.
Cool. Yeah, I really hope that we find like a decentralized identity solution in the future as well. But one step at a time.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so this I don't know, maybe this is a little in the weeds, but something I think a lot about is how many I used to work at the Verge. I'd be at the office, our internet would go out, and we could no longer chat with one another because we were all using Slack, and so
Yep.
we could not literally message each other without like pinging a centralized server. But there is something to you know even if I know your IP address, like it's a little hard sometimes for traffic to get from point A to point B, and something I'm trying to like learn a little bit more about, and like why these are some hard problems. And I know there's like libraries that are designed, like IPFS has, was it libp2p, or I forget who does libp2p, but there. So can you help illuminate like how is it just you just relying on lightning to get a message from point A to point B, or is there more that you're doing networking wise?
Yeah, right now it's purely piggybacked on top of Lightning, so I'm not really dealing with anything at the networking layer.
Okay.
A little bit with like pathfinding, like you do have some control um, with picking your routes. So a lot of times when you want to pay someone or send a message to someone, there's more than one way to get there, and so you do have some control over that. But at the networking layer, it's purely LND, and um, currently it's still just using TCP/IP. So if your internet goes down, unless all the nodes are behind a LAN or something, I don't think you're going to have any luck in that scenario. But there are a lot of interesting companies, or maybe not that many, but a couple interesting companies working on like different mesh networking solutions for both Bitcoin transactions and I assume some kind of lightning relay or something. But that might be a cool solution to remove the dependencies on ISPs in the long run, like small local mesh networks to get your packets and messages routed locally at least.
Yeah, well, and this kind of ties into like offline support. So like classically, like the reason that Signal needs to have, or one of the reasons, I'm assuming it's also to find the IP address of your friend's phone. But another reason Signal needs a central server is that if your friend isn't online, Signal can hold that message and then deliver it when they are
Mm-hmm.
online. So that seems like another thing that Lightning's basically solving here.
Well, yes and no. So you do need your node needs to be online. So just like with Lightning payments, you can't receive money on Lightning Network if you're offline, and it's um, sort of. I mean, I don't know if it's a problem, but it's definitely different than what people are used to. And so, in this case of messaging, since is just a payment at the end of the day, you have the same restrictions. And so, your node does have to be online, whether or not whatever if Juggernaut's running on your desktop or eventually your phone, the app wouldn't need to be online, but your node needs to be online.
Right. Which
And so,
I'm hoping this feels like a good trade-off to me to end up with a better future. That if I run a home server with a Bitcoin full node on it and maybe some other software or some other software on another server, that I can get a lot of these functionalities that are right now relying on centralized servers. But yeah, we're not going to magically invent no servers, but I mean
yeah,
that feels like a really good trade off because you in some sense you're not just ensuring access to the network for yourself, but also in other senses possibly helping the strength of the network because running a
yeah,
Lightning
exactly.
node. Um, okay, so another issue, and I actually haven't looked far enough in to know if does Juggernaut support group chat.
Yeah, as of today, it does not. It's kind of a tricky problem if you think about it. Like, someone needs to be the arbiter of who's in the group and to
Mm,
distribute the messages and things like that. And so, um, I haven't spent too much time actually right now thinking about it. But it does seem doable. Like, you just have to make sure one node is responsible. Like, someone would have to be the owner and the creator of a group, and then they're the
mm.
ones who are maintaining the lists and things like that of who's in it, and forwarding messages. And so it's sort of centralized at the group level. Like, each group owner is sort of you're trusting him to forward you the messages and things like that. That's one way. That's one maybe simple way to do it. There might be a more clever way. Though you run into, I think even Telegram and Signal run into this problem where I think they've found ways around it, but probably through centralization. But if you don't have someone in the center who's distributing messages, then you have every message, like every person has to send every message to everyone, and it just quickly becomes not scalable. And I know they used to limit like group sizes because of this on a lot of those apps. Um, I don't. Telegram clearly doesn't have that issue anymore. I've seen hundreds of people in a single chat. I don't know
Yeah.
what the status is on Signal right now, but I don't even know if they have group chats yet. It's definitely it's tricky technically and also like scalable. I think it's hard to scale in a decentralized way, as we've seen with a lot of decentralized technology.
Yeah, and could you imagine, like, especially like, let's say you're sending an image, and you're gonna stream it in 1 kilobyte packets or whatever the solution ends
Yeah.
up being there, to
hmm
like 20 people in one group, like, do you see there being some space for offloading some of the communication to like Lightning was the layer for discovery and like maybe doing a handshake, like setting up a connection with a peer. But once you
hmm
have that connection, maybe upgrading to an off Lightning, more direct communication.
Yeah, that was actually the original vision for Juggernaut. I When I first heard of this idea, I thought the key send payment idea. I thought, oh, that's a really cool protocol for initiating a handshake, like you talked about, and then moving into a truly peer to peer, just TCP connection. And so, one of the ideas in a upcoming version of Juggernaut is going to do exactly that, where you can request and with your chatting partner that, hey, let's establish a direct peer-to-peer connection. It can use something like WebRTC, since it's built using web technologies, and it uses the Lightning Network to do that initial handshake. And then after that, everything happens sort of in a layer 3, I guess, where you're not really a layer 3. It's a direct P2P connection with the person. And so you remove all the constraints and the routing issues, and you can easily send and receive larger files, and you can send messages without having to deal with routing fees on the Lightning Network and things like that.
And I realize I skipped encryption on my list, which is a pretty important one here. Yeah, I can imagine like a group chat, like maybe you're just messaging each other in kind of the verbose way to um, whatever ratchet key situation you've got going on to keep the
Yeah.
group. Although I think I talked about this with Matt Odell. Like if you're in a group chat, you're not really in a private conversation anymore, anyway. So,
True.
but yeah, what? How are you guys dealing with encrypting the messages?
Yeah, so we also get that for free with Lightning Network. So Lightning Network is also end-to-end onion routed encrypted. So each hop along the way, each node only knows about the hop before it and the hop after it. It doesn't know anything um, before or after those two hops. And so um, Juggernaut didn't need to do any special encryption on its own. It relies on the Lightning Network for that.
Hmm. Okay, so still going down the list, key messaging app features, stickers. Where are you at on stickers?
Stickers. Yeah, well, I thought emojis was good enough. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I guess stickers is pretty trivial. It's just, I guess maybe you have to figure out how to send an image. Though those
Well,
images are pretty small, so it seems pretty low on my priority list. Let's put it that way.
I guess along those lines, I think stickers have been a big method that messaging apps have monetized. Are you thinking of Juggernaut as purely and only like free and open source, or are you thinking of a potentially like a company? Is there a room for a company in a project like this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Juggernaut, no, I don't believe so. At least if done correctly, like you it's intended to be a free and open source tool to enable censorship resistant speech for the community. And also for me, it was largely a way to explore what is possible, to start to explore what's possible with this KeySend and LSAT technologies. And so messaging was sort of just the first obvious use case. I see a lot of other possibilities here. I talked about a little bit in the blog post and some other podcasts, but the idea that you can then extend this message, person to person messaging with text is great. But what's even more interesting to me is kind of person to machine or person to server messages. So, like the same way your browser makes an HTTP request to a server to perform some work and then return some result, you can do this same type of request response protocol with KeySend payments. And so, what does that look like, and what does that enable when you can make a request and attach a payment at the same time? And so, one idea that we've seen Lightning Labs start to explore, and I'd like to explore more, is this idea of like um, open APIs, sort of the idea that it's, right now, if I wanted to go create a Twilio, use the Twilio API to send a text message, I have to go register on Twilio. I have to give them some credit card or bank information. They have to like verify my account, and then I can go and send a text message. But really, I mean, maybe it's because of regulations, but in theory, with something like KeySend, you could create an API where I can pay 1 cent or whatever it is to send a text message without having to do any of that. The API can be paywalled in a kind of an open way where you can use the Lightning Network to pay for it as you use it. If that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I did hear you were also on the CoinDesk podcast in April, so
Yeah.
people should definitely check that out if they want um, 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 more of you. The um, Yeah, this idea of packaging like the payment and the request as the same thing. I feel like I can remember when Amazon patented one-click buying, and so
Yeah.
everybody had to have something that involved multiple clicks to buy something that
Just too
people had to
many.
make their shopping arbitrarily more difficult to avoid this patent. But yeah, I really think there's a lot to that. Like, a popular example in Lightning right now is Y'alls. So you go to Y'alls and there is an article, but it's behind a paywall. It's a list of articles. They're each behind a paywall, and then you can pay the requested fee, and then you um, get access to that article. But it does seem like there's something potentially there. I know I kind of moved it back to the more user-facing applications, but there
Mhm.
seems to be something there of that the request is the payment. If you can figure out how budgeting for in that sense, like maybe any article I'll pay 10 sats for anybody, you know?
Yeah.
And so I could just pre-confirm that. Although I guess I need to be formatting that as a request. I don't know. It seems like there's a lot to figure out there, but there's a lot to that idea, I think.
Yeah, it's a big idea, and I think I'm not sure it's actually going to end up, maybe not initially at least, being kind of an end consumer visible technology, because I think people have tried micropayments in different ways. Like you can kind of do centralized micropayments, right? Where I keep a balance on some service, and then every article I read, it debits, a cent from it or something like that. I
Hmm.
think one of the bigger challenges there is sort of like human psychology. Like I don't want to think about like each. I don't know. Like it seems like a lot to think about and deal with. Like, oh, am I paying? How much am I spending? Like I don't know. Maybe it's too complicated, too much to think about. People don't really want to deal with it. They're like, hey, I just want to pay $10 a month and be done with it. But from like a developer perspective, I think um, there's a lot of like, I think there's a lot of potential value with making like API marketplaces or different APIs more accessible to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Like make it
Mm.
like, hey, I just need an API that does this. I'm willing to pay a cent, and it sort of can figure out where it needs to go. I don't know, but anyways, back to
Yeah.
your like original question around making money or a business out of it, and I think how I'm looking at it is sort of still just like a really early exploration into what is possible, and but as far as Juggernaut goes, I do always want to make it free and open source. I don't plan on like paying for stickers or sending special messages or something like that. But I think around it there could become like services that support it. So like one big thing we haven't talked about yet that is sort of my main focus now and for a long time I feel like is the onboarding. So I created this software, I put it out there for the world, and even some of like my best friends are just like, I don't have a Bitcoin node, I don't have a Lightning node. What do you mean I need to do all this to use this app? Like it's never worrying about like stickers or like even group chats. It's kind of pointless in my opinion if no one's ever going to use your software. So one of the main focuses right now for me is around onboarding into Bitcoin and more primarily into Lightning, since there's a lot of companies already working on the Bitcoin part of that.
And how does that look? Is that like a Raspberry Blitz in every home, or is that a off the shelf
I
hardware?
wish, yeah.
What are you thinking there?
Yeah, so my dream is sort of something you touched on, and I hope we end up in a future there where everyone kind of runs. Maybe it's part of their router or some kind of home server, like you said. It runs maybe SMTP, it runs their Bitcoin node, it runs their Lightning node, it runs like a little web server, but file sharing service. I think that's a cool place to end up. I think we're a ways away from that. Of course, I'd love everyone to run, a Raspberry Pi in their closet, but I also don't think that's very realistic for most people, at least where we are today. And so for me, I'm looking at it more of like uh, allowing people to like sacrificing some of the decentralization to make it easier. Like there's that trade off, right? And so I think an ideal service is something that makes it easy to use immediately and see why this might be valuable, and then push them in a direction towards more decentralization. So like you have offerings that um, that work at each level. So like you can have the full centralized Coinbase of Lightning, basically. Like let's get you on in one click. Yeah, you're not really running a node, but we're going to run it for you on a shared node or something. And then you can slowly, and the main driver becomes education, teaching them about why they actually need to run a node, run their own nodes, and what benefits they get from that, and why they should care, and sort of pushing them along that path towards running the Raspberry Pi in their closet. And so I think I think that's sort of the right way to go about it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I'm glad you're on board for this future. What are some of the obstacles? Like, why do you think uh, we don't have homes? I mean, some people have a Plex server at home.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
what?
I know why I think. I think the answer is just it's easy enough not to, like, the centralized services are so easy to use and so cheap. Why am I going to do that? And so the reason you see people with Plex servers is because it's hard and expensive to have every movie ever created, albeit also illegal. But and so when I can just, that's why people turn to piracy, right? And when we saw things like Spotify and Netflix make it so easy to pay and do it legally, I think a lot of those services people don't use as much as they used to. Maybe they do. I know I don't anymore. But like, all the Usenet and torrents and stuff like that, I feel like some of that lost its luster when I could pay $10 a month and get access to every song ever created forever and every movie I want to watch. So I think it's sort of battling this idea of need. Like, I don't need to do it at home. There's a much easier solution. And so I think to get to that future where people are running more of these services at home, even if they don't even know, I think to make it mass market, they're not really going to have to understand that they're doing it and just be like, oh, I need this box so that the government can't stop me or something. And I think people are going to need it or actually want to have this power. And I think we're starting to see some of the people realize some of the, like, kind of the oversteps that a lot of the governments around the world are making, and the privacy invasions where we're seeing them, have back doors into every possible device and company on the internet. People are sure that their phones are listening to them and serving them ads. I think at some point, I hope we reach a breaking point where people are like, enough is enough. I'm sick of being surveilled and watched and told what I can and cannot do, and be deplatformed from YouTube. And we can kind of take back control. And I think the way we take back control is through exactly this: run your own nodes, run your own servers.
Hmm.
Control your destiny.
So it sounds like what you're saying is we need more government overreach to promote Juggernaut adoption.
Well, I think what's funny is they don't even know they don't realize they're doing it. But I think they're going to continue to reach and take power and overstep, and a lot of these large companies are letting them do it. And I think it's gonna be their own downfall in the long run.
I thought it was really interesting. I mean, this has kind of been my approach a little bit to like big companies and antitrust, is that I want to sort of, instead of just being mad at them for abusing their market position, try to find ways to just rat around them as much as possible. Obviously, with a very similar thought with the government. Um, and so there's like today's hot news is um, DHH. I don't know his actual name. The Ruby on Rails guy, Basecamp guy, the guy who he's got this new email service,
Yeah,
hey.com.
hey.com. Yeah.
And they launched on iOS, but now Apple won't let them update the app unless, like, they play by all of Apple's rules where you can't promote your subscription service from within the app. So they did all
Yep.
their subscription stuff completely external from Apple, so that they don't have to give Apple a 30% cut. But now Apple's basically holding their app hostage unless they give this 30% cut. And I just think it's real interesting to see. It's like it's a shitty situation in the moment, and I hope it works out for hey.com and for people who want to use that service or whatever. But also for me, it really promotes, like, wow, I need a good non-Apple or Google mobile operating system. Like, I need a lot more open source software, like, pretty quickly to have a lot more agency in this world.
Yeah, for sure. I also am currently using an Apple phone, but every day I see, I see all these people like Matt Odell and them posting. I forget what OS everyone's moving to, Graphene,
Graphene
or
OS.
is
There's
that
like a
it?
Google
Yeah.
free fork of
Yep.
Android.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like the way to go. I mean, I don't think it's probably ready for mass adoption, but it does seem more interesting every day that passes.
Along those lines, like one of the interesting things is like push and I don't know if this is in your expertise, but push notifications have become a very centralized thing. Um, like, could you imagine a mobile Juggernaut app? Like, is it polling constantly, like pinging your server every second, you're pinging your home node every second to see if you have any new messages? Like, do you know anything about, like, because I think push notifications have been this like one of the many centralizing forces with phones.
Yeah. Well, the problem with so A, to answer your first question, no, it doesn't pull. The Lightning node LND supports kind of push notifications, so it subscribes to an event and waits for an incoming invoice, and so it doesn't have to do constant polling. Though I guess it depends on how the event system is implemented. But anyways, it is reliant on LND to notify that there's a new message. And
Yeah.
so I think the problem with push notifications, I don't know too much about it other than kind of that basically there's two, maybe three main services you can use, one by Google, one by Apple, and maybe Microsoft has one. I don't know.
Hmm.
But I think what happens is you're kind of stuck on what the phone lets you do, right? Like I can build an app that can do a push notification using WebSockets or something if the app is open, but if the app's not allowed to run in the background and listen for incoming messages and is not allowed to display it in whatever format a push notification is, then there's not a lot I can do. Like a lot of the UI and the um, like the library access and what you can actually do on an Apple phone is controlled entirely by Apple. So I haven't looked into what like this fork of Android is, but I assume on Android actually there's probably a way to do native push notifications without having to use one of these push notification services. But yeah, until like you said, we move to more non-controlled by these big companies phones, like there's not much we can do about it.
All right, so just more stuff to look into and figure out. But I want to
Yeah.
get it all solved. Um, so there's this really I don't know if it's a famous talk. It's famous in my head for some reason of this the lead Signal developer talking about why do messaging as a company and in some sense centralized. A lot of Signal code is open source, but in other senses it's not. Um, and one of his big things was sort of the agility of when you're a central control over the protocol, you can upgrade the protocol. If you're a decentralized protocol, um, you have to have unanimity or perfect backwards compatibility or both, and you could end
Mm-hmm.
up with the web standard or just real slow evolution. So what are your thoughts along that, and do you see, is there any potential for like interoperable, like just a lightning messaging protocol?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in Bitcoin can feel can understand his message, right? Like we see it with Bitcoin all the time. We're kind of stuck with what we have. It's extremely hard to upgrade. Everyone either, like you said, everyone needs to agree and have like a super majority to kind of move forward, or it needs to be completely backwards compatible. And so, we do see a lot of upgrades in Bitcoin, but it's not as fast as some of these more centralized altcoins can iterate. And so, I think in terms of like a messaging layer for Lightning, I think there's definitely the possibility to have interoperability. And I think there's a couple other people playing with chat apps like the Sphinx guys, and there's like a Android app, AnySend or ManySend. Sorry, I always forget. And they're all using the same sort of key send protocol that the LND developer put out there. And so they are largely interoperable, but it's sort of so early that we're all using different, like I added a bunch of different fields that the initial prototype didn't have around um, like a message type or the ability to do a response. Like that's how I do some of the payment request functionality. And all of that stuff is custom and not aligned with anyone else. And so there does need to be some kind of spec, the same way any industry comes up with some kind of agreed upon spec. Um, you could definitely do something like that with Lightning. I also spoke with Alex Bosworth from Lightning Labs about this a little bit, and he had a really cool idea on how to make them almost all interoperable, like if like opt in, sort of. It's like they can choose to be if they want, where you sort of the payload you're sending is sort of just key value pairs, and you make known, like you publicly you make it public what you're using for each piece of data, and then anyone can kind of build a integration to support the different keys that you might be using for each field.
So I could like I could you've got a message field, and I make the world's most feature incomplete chat app, and it can read the message field off of messages
Yeah,
on the Lightning
exactly.
Network, and then
Yeah,
I'm
people have done that. Yeah.
nice. Well, yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping for something like that, but I'm trying to be patient here. I'm trying to just let this play out, and like I've been really interested ever since I saw the WhatsApp demo. Been really interested in this idea of lightning message, and I'm trying to really keep my eyes and ears out for like the drawback, like what what's wrong with
Yeah.
this idea, because there's I really want a decentralized messaging protocol. I mean, for me, one of the biggest things is this is the spam resistance, and we haven't talked too much about it, but like right now you're paying somebody one sat when you send a message to them, and if you send like three messages to them, then they have a three sat balance, and when they send you a message, Juggernaut tries to kind of keep that balance, so they'll send you the three sats. um, I really like the idea of potentially being able to raise the limit to, like, if people I don't know try to message me, they got to pay me like
Hmm.
$1 worth to
Yeah.
to get through my spam filter. I think there's something really powerful, and it like it removes a lot of the tragedy of the commons that you get in like a lot of distributed systems.
Yeah, I think that's another really important idea to explore is like, I don't know if you remember like the original earn.com Balaji started a while ago, where it was more about this, like you have everyone can have an inbox, and you can kind of set a minimum threshold for a message to be read by the receiver. So all these people, like all these influencers with audiences, could kind of put out their inbox and say, "Hey, you want to send a message to Elon Musk? Well, he'll read your message for $200,
Hmm.
whatever it might be." And so it's kind of like a paywalled inbox, and you can do this sort of natively with something like Juggernaut or the Lightning Network, where, like you said, I can just make a setting in my app that says, "Hey, if it's below this threshold, put it in my spam folder or something. Otherwise, surface it." At the same time, I think there's something else, like an extension of that, that's also interesting, which is this idea of like streaming payments. So the idea that maybe I'm teaching a webinar or teaching an online course or something, and I want I don't, maybe I don't want them to pay for the whole course up front because, or maybe the instructor wants everyone to pay up front, but I'm a student, I'm nervous, I'm not sure this teacher's for me or the content's for me, or I don't know, most people probably drop off of these online courses after 3 videos. It's hard to keep the motivation going. And so one idea that I like a lot is this idea is like pay for what you consume, pay as you go. And you could offer like a live stream course where, to stay connected, you just keep streaming Satoshis while you're there. And if you decide that this isn't for me, or I don't like it anymore, or, I changed my mind, you're not stuck with, oh, I just paid $3,000 for this course. I only paid $20 for the first 10 minutes, or, whatever the rate might be. And it'll allow you to be more comfortable exploring different courses.
I really like that as an incentive structure to make something that's compelling and educational the whole way through. I also could imagine it
Yeah.
playing out whether you just put all the good information right at the end somehow. No, that's
That's
I like
true.
that.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking in this like this postage concept of like maybe one of these APIs that your pay per use like is like an image upload API, and maybe you could someone could just run a service like, hey, will accept, encrypted images and will store them for a week. Um, if you pay us, and
Yeah, I
then
mean that's
like
pretty
to
much
your
what
recipient.
IPFS is, right?
Oh yeah, 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 kind of like the
A lot
pin
of
the
these, like,
pin stuff.
yeah, and like storage is one company. There's another SIA Skynet. They also released this like basically decentralized CDN idea. So I think we're seeing a lot of interesting solutions for file storage.
Are any of them
Which yeah,
playing with Lightning?
um, none of the guys I mentioned are that I know of. Um, but there's this guy. I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, but like Dr. Oxim Marlovsky or something like that. He's this awesome Lightning developer who's like, I picture him in a big cave, like just coding 28 hours a day, like nonstop on Lightning stuff, and he's got all sorts of interesting specs and protocols for decentralized file storage and all sorts of other things, all built on top
Oh,
of Lightning Network. It's something I'm following really closely, and he also is working on Rust Bitcoin and the Rust Lightning implementation, and so that's another thing that's leading me towards. We were speaking a bit before we started about how I'm starting learning Rust, and this is one of the reasons. Is I think a lot of the most interesting development is actually happening over there, and that's something to keep an eye on, and something I definitely am keeping my eyes on.
yeah, I use every chance I can get to shill Rust. I really like talking to somebody, interviewing somebody who I've like stalked on GitHub, like just looking at your commits on your project, like
And a lot of
how's
it's
the
private,
velocity on
but
this
yeah.
one? So one more element of the classic messaging app is mobile, and so Juggernaut is
Mm-hmm.
desktop right now. Like, do you have is Juggernaut an experiment, and you're figuring it out? And if it's really popular, you think of making a mobile app, or do you already have plans for mobile? Like, what are you thinking along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think any type of service, maybe not any type of service, most services where you want to reach a lot of people these days, mobile is sort of a requirement, and it would be pretty easy to port it over to something like React Native or whatever the new hot web framework on mobile is these days. But it's for me, like you said, it's sort of like an experiment slash like exploration. I think we're a little ways away, unfortunately, for a lot of this stuff to go mainstream, and so I think there's a lot of time. I don't think magically, like if I make a mobile app version of Juggernaut, I'm going to get 100 million people to use it. And
Right, like you said,
I realized, yeah, like I'm about to say again, the biggest problem is onboarding into Lightning. It's like cool, like this app looks great. I want it. Oh, I need Lightning. What's that? Oh, I need Bitcoin to run Lightning. Oh, what's that? Like, it's just there's a lot of work to be done. I think before we get to some of these, it's sort of like a catch-22. Also, like you need these exciting applications to get people interested. Like a lot of times, people are like, well, mostly people who are uneducated about Bitcoin are like, well, I don't, why do I need that? And everyone's always looking for like the use case or, something like that.
hmm
But when really like Bitcoin itself, in my opinion, is the use case, censorship resistant non-government money is enough for me. But if there are other cool things we can do with it, with Lightning or some other layer two technology on top of it, then great. As whatever we can do to for people to find their reason to take the plunge is a good thing.
Well, and it's interesting how messaging. Again, I'm trying to find reasons to be critical of messaging over Lightning. Like maybe this is adulterating the purpose of it. But like, it seems like it would be really good and healthy for the Lightning network. Like, it incentivizes you to open more, like at least small channels, just so that you can have
Mm-hmm.
like free messages with other people. And since there's a lot of small traffic going over, so like it possibly makes like a more a routing node, um, possibly profitable, which would be
Mm-hmm.
an interesting milestone to reach with Lightning. It seems like it feels like really healthy for the network.
It could be, yeah. I think if it got a lot of people to run nodes, yeah. At the same time, you could say it's sort of unhealthy for the network in the sense that you're routing all of these minuscule millions and millions potentially of payments. It's sort of like the same reason people call a lot of what people use the Bitcoin blockchain for as like spam or a waste of space. It's like, well, if they're willing to pay for it, then is it really spam? I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, I think there's an argument to be made in either direction there.
Yeah, I would really love to learn the actual eventual economics of it, because like in some sense, like right now, well, I guess probably for a long time, it's relatively expensive. Like the number of satoshis you get routing people's payments versus the number of satoshis you spend on your Bitcoin transaction to open a channel. Because people
Hmm.
unfamiliar, to create a channel on the Lightning Network, you do an on-chain transaction, and to close that channel, you do an on-chain transaction. Um, so yeah, could routing messages make you closer to profitable, or just like spam your node so hard that it's just even less worthwhile? I like this. We're finding potential negatives.
I can come up with a couple more, but yeah, I think there are people who are net positive on their routing node. Like Alex Bosworth, I'm pretty sure is. He posts his stats like every couple months or something like that, and I'm always interested. He's one of the more well connected nodes since he's been doing it for a long time and focuses on making sure that his channels are always balanced and he's well connected, and he's being a good node. And so I think it is possible to overcome the on-chain fees. And I think we're going to see a lot of interesting ways to minimize those on-chain fees, like being able to open up multiple channels with one transaction and things like that. So you can kind of distribute the cost across lots of channels, and other ways to increase the lifetime of a channel, like with the Loop product by Lightning Labs, lets you kind of extend the life by topping up the balance on either side of the
Mm.
channel. And so you can avoid that closing channel transaction for as long as possible. So I think there's a ways to go in terms of like trying to figure out where, like, any kind of analysis being done today on the like cost analysis and things like that are a little premature, most likely, in my opinion. But if we go back to other downsides of messaging, if you want me to try to
Please,
find some
yes,
for you,
yeah, absolutely.
um, I mean, the number one thing is the onboarding for sure. Like it's way easier to get up and running on Signal than it is on Juggernaut, unless of course you're already in the whole like Lightning community. And the other big downside right now is the routing fees, which you kind of alluded to as well. But I don't have to pay for every message I send on Signal. And obviously, like we talked about, there are ways around that or to minimize that with Juggernaut, like taking it kind of off network by just using it to do the handshake. That would be a cool way to really minimize on the fees. Like you also mentioned, and I have this idea, and I think it's good for people to run, or I at least want to run for the network, like a message routing node. And so the node is like, it's geared to only route small payments. So you actually can't route large payments through it. Like anything, it only routes a Satoshi or lower or something like that, and charges, next to no fee. And so I think there are ways to minimize the cost. But as of today, there's cost per message, which I think is sort of a showstopper in terms of mass adoption of this type of messenger.
Because you think,
Yeah.
even though it's fractional, that's just the psychological idea of sending a little bit of money is going to bother people.
I mean, it'd be an interesting like survey to do, but I don't know. I guess what an interesting study to look at would be like when text messaging first came out, you did pay per text. So I guess maybe
Right.
people are
Whi-
okay with it.
Which, which is actually like a huge reason why like WhatsApp, the real
Took
WhatsApp,
off. Yeah.
because it was free text messaging.
Yeah, that's
Especially,
funny.
yes, because like a lot of other countries didn't get to unlimited texts like they did in the U.S., and so that
Mhm.
everybody just got WhatsApp. Yeah,
Yeah. I
that's
mean, one
it's
other thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, though it's a downside for like having to pay for every message, even like you said, even though if it's like a thousandth of a penny, um, I think we're at least today where where something like even Bitcoin or Juggernaut is important is when it's needed, right? So this idea that like a lot of people can't grasp why anyone cares or wants Bitcoin because, in their country, credit cards work great. And, at least for now. And it's like, well, my money works fine. So I don't need to do any work to educate or, figure out how to use this other kind of money. But I think what happens is when you're in a place where, the government does overstep and tells you what you can and cannot spend your money on, then it's all of a sudden you're like, well, maybe it'd be nice to have this system where I can route around that. And so for the same thing with speech, I see like, we're seeing it all the time now with these platforms removing people for having certain opinions and things like that. And like an extreme example would be like some kind of like revolution or something where the government's trying to stop, people from communicating effectively. In a situation like that, you need a system where you can route around um, these third parties. And so something like Juggernaut or where you have decentralized messaging could become so important that paying for it, is a no-brainer. It doesn't matter. You need it. So, you need it. It's not just a luxury.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what sort of a lot of this is about, at least to me, is kind of, you might not need it today, but when you do need it, boy, will you be happy that it exists. And so it's just kind of exploring, what systems can we build, and they may not be useful to everyone today, but hopefully they're useful to someone somewhere someday.
Yeah, well, and I think that's I really like that perspective, and it's interesting, and it's a little difficult in the sense that, like, if the government is gonna, shut down all my communications, or like, or just the government's gonna block Signal tomorrow, because it turns out we have a great firewall or whatever. Um, I'm not ready. I've got a box ready to be my full node, but it's not up and
Yeah,
running. So I'm like, I got like a 5 day uh, blockchain sync
yeah,
to
you better
look
get
forward
started.
to before I got my full node running and I can start messaging. So yeah, it's interesting. Like how can we make the wood dry, to so to speak, for like, so people when they do need it, they can quickly adopt useful tools, because I think that has
Yeah,
actually happened with Signal just recently, or a lot of
yep.
people jumped on Signal because they wanted to be less tracked.
Yeah, I think it's a trend. We're like a mega trend. We're kind of in right now. It's taking a long time, but it feels like we're slowly moving in that direction right now. And people are starting to really wake up, especially with, I feel like every month we hear a new story about something that happened at Apple or Facebook or whatever. It's just kind of never ending, it feels like. And so I don't know if anyone's ever going to care enough to do something about it, but it seems like we're at least moving in that direction, albeit a little slowly.
How how would this is putting you on the spot and totally unfair, but how would you fix Twitter? What would you do?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that. Jack tweeted out, I don't know how long ago, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, like he sort of believes that the future of Twitter is actually decentralized, where there's not some company like Twitter or him in place to say who gets to say what. And he wants to invest in companies that are looking to kind of build that and sort of build Twitter out of existence, or at least in
That's
its current
right.
form. And
Didn't he
so
start like a task force or something for that?
maybe internally in Twitter, yeah, maybe he like gave someone the power to go and like find people working on this. And there are a lot of people working on this, and there are some ideas we could look at with Lightning Network and Juggernaut and how you could try to start to do it. But again, you run into these scalability issues pretty quickly. Like, what
Yeah.
is Twitter? It's sort of like this massive group chat. So maybe there's a way to do broadcast in a different way, which is sort of what Twitter is. But yeah, I think this idea that these platforms ended up with so much power. I don't think maybe they realized it when they were starting, but I feel like they probably didn't really understand where the world was going to end up. But um, yeah, it's sort of this problem where they are kind of the arbiters of what's what people are allowed to say or what's true,
Yeah.
what's what. And so yeah, I think
Well,
finding a way. So back to your question of how to fix it. I don't know. If I did, I think I would be talking to Jack about, hey, I have this great way to solve it and give you some money. But it does seem like there's a lot of people kind of dancing around the edge, and I think we'll figure it out.
yeah, I think. Oh wow! I just totally totally spaced on what I was gonna say. I like looked into my mind for the thing I was about to say, and it just said
It was
decentralized in my
gone.
mind. Just
Yeah.
big
I mean,
letters, but no subtext. um, yeah, I do hope we figure something out, and I think there's something. Yeah, and I definitely don't want to shoehorn anything into Lightning or Bitcoin that doesn't belong there, because like you were
yeah,
saying, like the money thing is a big enough deal and important enough to get right that like yeah, we don't need to mess with that. But yeah, like I hope. I mean, because you're right. Oh, the thing I was gonna say, kind of like on a mundane note, is I feel like what has happened with a lot of these social networks is that you build an audience on them, and then even if they're not censoring you, they start kind of selling you access to the audience that you already built.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and I can see that there being like another force of the Wendy's of the world, like wanting a better way to have access to people who want to hear their witty tweets without
Yep.
having to like sponsor their tweets. And then Facebook has been, I think, the most egregious in this. Of you can build a following on Facebook, and then you basically have to pay for them to see what you post. Um,
Hmm.
anyways,
Yeah, I mean, as
there's
soon
so
as
much there.
money's involved, it gets ugly. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, and yeah, but if no money's involved, then it becomes, it's just a like spam fest.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing I was going to mention with the decentralized Twitter or social network is like if you remove the person in charge of like it starts as like this innocent like helpful thing, like we don't want you really don't want something filled with like hate speech and people spamming and trying to sell you pills all the time. I don't know, like no one wants
Rick
that as
rolling
well.
you.
So like yeah, well maybe that's not too bad, but um and so I think it starts off innocent of like trying to make the platform more enjoyable for people, and then it
Hmm.
starts to enter this gray area of like, well, where is the line and who defines the line, and it is really difficult to say. And so I think in a system where you didn't have that, I think maybe you do need the money that you need to pay the message or something to try to filter out some of that noise. So maybe the Lightning Network styled pay per message is sort of on the right track.
Hmm. And yeah, I do like that you mentioned it. It's like a big group chat. Like that's just how I that's why I've always liked Twitter so much, because it is like you're in a chat room and you decided who is in the chat room with you to some extent.
Yeah,
Other than like
I always say that to people.
it's kind of beautiful. I just hope we can, yeah, I hope we can find ways to improve it or replace it. Um, well, yeah. So well, I think we're wrapping up here, but where's Juggernaut at right now? Like, what are you actively working on it, or do you have like features you're thinking that you still do want to get in? Like, what are you thinking future wise?
Yeah, there's a lot that I want to explore. Like I mentioned, like some of the things in the shorter term are things like the kind of open a direct peer-to-peer channel so that you can hop off of the network once you establish it with someone you're chatting with, as well as things like once you have that, because of WebRTC, you also get video and voice chat basically for free, and so that'll be a
Hmm.
nice little feature. And then, you could think about something like group chat and how you might do that. But for me, my main focus is sort of on onboarding. And so for now, that is like, how do you get someone running a node quickly and easily as possible? Can I, same way like Coinbase worked on onboarding people to Bitcoin, like how do I get someone from like US dollars to Bitcoin? Well, how do I get someone from either US dollars to Lightning Network or from Bitcoin to Lightning Network as quick as possible? And so I've sort of been playing with a few solutions to that, and hopefully you'll see something from me soon in that area.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, maybe you can help me get on. I feel so bad because I started this decentralized podcast, and right around the same time, I bought like a little box to be my home node, and I'm just like, I'm so busy. I'm too busy doing my decentralized podcast to do any decentralization myself. So I gotta rectify that. But well, thank you so much for coming on here, and thanks for working on Juggernaut. Like, I'm stoked that people like you are kind of engaging with these ideas and problems, and seeing like what could work.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It was a great chat. And yeah, I hope more people find the passion to go explore these new technologies because I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of possibilities and, way more than someone like me can do by myself. So come join us.
Yeah, yeah. Are you looking for contributors on the GitHub?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always difficult, but yeah, come reach me out at Twitter at John Cantrell 97 or at GitHub or pretty much those are the two main places I hang out. So reach out to me if you want to help out or if you have ideas for some other related project. Happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and to everybody listening, I hope you have a great day.